Welcome to Association Chat. This is your go-to podcast for insights and stories from the association industry. I'm your host, KiKi L'Italien, and hey, today, bots and bonds, AI specifically, let's talk about it. We're actually going to talk a little bit more about some of the philosophy involved with what goes into working with associations when you're talking about technology, and especially things that are advancing like with AI. We're going to talk about human behavior and what goes into working with associations and human behavior and all the things we need to understand about members and interactions and how to use technology to better aid in associations achieving their missions. But you know what? I don't know. It's me talking already way too much. I want to bring on the people who are here, who are the stars, the real stars of the show. Welcome to Association Chat. This is the cast and crew and amazing team from BettyBot.ai. So welcome, Team BettyBot.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Hi, KiKi.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Hi.
having us.
I know. I was telling everyone ahead of time, it was like, I knew that this was going to be a fun show, but the intros were going to be kind of crazy. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to give each of you a chance to do a little self-introduction, to talk a little bit about your role with BettyBot, but also maybe a sentence or two about some other things that you're involved with, projects you're involved with, that association executives watching this may or may not already know that you have been involved and learning and building and developing and doing some incredible stuff. So with that, let me start with, I'm going to start with Thomas Altman. Hello, Thomas Altman.
Thank you. So yeah, Thomas Altman, co-founder of a company called Tasio. We do a lot of taking cutting edge technologies like AI and bringing them to the association market. The reason we feel like we can do that is because our backgrounds are in associations and also in data analytics, machine learning, and software engineering. So we've worked with different AMS providers. We've brought other things to market. We do a lot of educational content around AI and machine learning as well, data analytics. So that's what we do. It's what I do anyway.
That's good stuff. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go to Dray next. Dray, go ahead. Yes.
So I'm the other half of Tasio with Thomas. Like you said, we've worked with AMS vendors in the past, and in particular, both of us sort of had a business analyst type of role where it wasn't just focused on the technology, but focused on the business background for associations. So those of you who have had to go through an AMS implementation, I'm sure really enjoyed it. But in the process, your vendors get to learn a lot about how associations work. So we have almost 20 years of experience doing all of that, took that with us towards the data analytics and AI side. And then in the past year and a half have really focused in on the generative AI pieces. And that's what led to Betty. That also led us to a former colleague here, Rob Barnes. We were able to bring him on board and just really excited to have brought him over to the United States to join us too.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's talk about Rob, because Rob, this is a matter like save the best for last. I don't know if I can say that, but Rob, I've known for the longest. And so, yes, indeed, Rob, and share with us a little bit about your background. I know maybe a little bit like more going extensive into the past. I'm not sure.
2008, KiKi, 2008, San Diego ASAE annual meeting.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
It was my first ever annual meeting. I've been an association executive, I guess, my entire career. My first job was with an association. I was 19, and apart from a little aberration into corporate technology back in 2013 or 2014, something like that. I've been in the association space the entire time. So. My last association role was the Fitness Industry Association, which is, I was there nearly a decade, and KiKi, that was our formative years as a crew at annual. And then that's when I made the jump. People keep referring to it as going to the dark side, but I was offered the opportunity to sell Aptify and start the business for Aptify in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So 2013. And so that's when Thomas and Dray and I first started working together, was through our Aptify years. And now we've got the band back together again.
Yeah.
I know. It's like the theme in the tech field and associations right now is like getting the band back together. And I mean, you know what happens with that is that it's a chance to build new things. It's a chance to think of things in new ways. And I'm so excited to find out what you all have been up to because, I mean, obviously, getting everybody together, you have some idea. None of you are short on ideas, and this is what I know. So I wanted to talk with you a little bit because, as everyone knows, and Joanna, I saw that you said hello, Joanna, and everyone, please, Associations Thrive. Please follow some of these amazing association podcasters that are out there doing fantastic, fabulous work. There's a group of us who are talking on a regular basis together and getting better and better, I think, because of it. And Joanna's right there, involved in all of it. So thanks, Joanna. But as Joanna knows, it's like we're hearing about AI nonstop. You cannot go anywhere, not just in the association industry, but like really anywhere without seeing something about AI showing up, popping up in your face everywhere. And it becomes very difficult to break through the noise. So what I want to know, and what you're so kind to share with me earlier, is what's different. What's really different about what you're doing that is fascinating for the people who are listening to this show, who, yeah, they can sign up for a demo later. They can find out about what's going on with BettyBot. Of course, that's fascinating, and we all want to do that. But like, what's different about what you're doing right now as it pertains to, working with the associations that you've known and worked with for so long? I'm going to go to you, Rob. I'm starting with you. You're the man. This is where it starts, right here.
Well, I'll tell you why I came on board. When I saw, and I bought softwares and I bought technologies for my associations, and then I started selling it in the US and back home in Australia. And when I saw what Thomas and Dray had done, what they had built based on the years of research and innovation that they were doing already at Tassio, and I definitely want them. What I'm doing here is leading in because I want you to hear what they were doing prior to all of this. When I saw what BettyBot was capable of, it was jaw-dropping for me. And I've been around the traps for a little while. And even since that time, I've never heard compliments on demos for technology in my entire career. And yet we have received some incredible compliments about the work that we're doing. And it's not because of Betty as an generative AI tool. It's because of what she's capable of doing for this broader methodology, concept, philosophy that we have around knowledge management. So when I saw this back in October of last year, and I just happened to be, for the first time in my life, without a job. I'd just been laid off by my previous technology company, and spent some time holidaying with my family. Like, oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I'm just going to reach out to some people. And one of them was Amit Nagarajan, and said, hey, by the way, I don't have a job at the moment. You got anything cooking? And he was straight onto me about getting in touch with Thomas and Dray. I flew to the States, spent some time with them, and picked up from scratch about what generative AI was capable of doing. And then when I saw its application from an association standpoint, it has driven our whole, our internal discussion threads about what we want to stand for as a company and what we want to support as a company beyond just the technology. And we haven't really talked about it a lot publicly. We've saved a little bit of it for you, especially KiKi, for today. So, people will start hearing the term, the association knowledge cycle, more and more from us, because it's really what we are doing. It's what we stand for as a company, and how we're building our roadmap and our culture as an organization as well. And I just had to get on board. And so, it's like, okay, well, now's the time. I'm finally, after 20 odd years of visiting the US, I'm living in the US permanently now. We moved here a month ago, and I couldn't and be more excited about why we've made this huge leap of faith into BettyBot as a company and moving the family over here. And as I say, working back together with Thomas and Dray again, it's been super exciting.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I think I want to hear Thomas and Dray. I want to hear from both of you too about this because from your perspectives, it's like you're seeing a chance to begin, I don't know, crafting this company into something that you believe in and also building off of the things that you've had experience on before. So Thomas, I'm going to pick on you next. What are your thoughts about this as far as, some of this work that you're doing to interact with the associations? Where did it come from? How is it developing? Tell me all of the stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So the thing that I get so excited about in this sort of overlapping Venn diagram of AI and associations is, for the first time in my experience working with associations, it's when they are at the forefront, like they are the ones set to benefit the most. Beyond any sort of for-profit, beyond governmental, associations, I believe, are set to benefit the most from this generative AI technology. And the reason goes back to that knowledge, right? So every association has, knowledge at the core of what they do, that's bringing information to its members, bringing information to the general public, advocacy. All of that is based off of a core set of information and knowledge, right? So when we've got, Betty, what eventually became Betty, was really about how do we take that knowledge, all this hundreds plus years in some case of knowledge, and really enable it to provide action, right? How does we put a value multiplier on top of that knowledge, right? And that's where Betty sort of evolved to. And what is really cool about that is a little bit of the history of how it came to be. So prior to Betty, we were working on a different set of concepts, one of which was identifying at-risk members from like transactional data in the AMS. So people did this or didn't do that. Does that make them more or less likely to renew, right? And we were able to do that pretty well. And what we quickly found out was no one was doing anything with that, right? Like it didn't really matter that we could tell you that person's probably not going to renew because you didn't know how to intercept them, right? So about 2.5, 3 years ago, we kind of keyed off on this technology, kind of young technology at the time called GPT, and started building out like these pipelines and like sort of tinkering and figuring out. And through that process of what I thought was maybe just sort of the last mile of what we were building at the time actually became the basis for this much larger, like, oh, once you access the full set of knowledge and you can engage members conversationally where they are, meeting them with their own mental model, not only do they get more value out of the knowledge that they're getting from you, they are taking action with that knowledge, which makes them more likely to come and re-engage with you, which, and this was sort of the biggest key learning in the past maybe 4 or 5 months, they are then revealing knowledge needs back to the association. And we can capture all of that, right? So when somebody is spending their time interacting with BettyBot, really what they're doing is saying, hey, association, I've got this strong knowledge need, so much so that I'm taking time out of my day to search for it. And then we can send that back to the association, and then they can get ahead of the next knowledge need cycle or employ Betty to make a first draft at like creating that knowledge too. So I'm just so excited about like what's possible. And I feel like we've only started to push what we can do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I really love that idea because it's such a question about what do we have this idea about what people say that they want, but it's when they're actually searching, it's when they're actually going in, it's based on the behaviors that they exhibit that you can identify what it is that they really care about the most versus what they're going to respond in a survey or something like that.
Exactly.
And so this idea of observing the reality of what people are looking for and what they're interested in, there's a lot of value in that. And it has to be incredibly exciting to work with something where you know that you can provide that. Like that's like kind of, this hidden knowledge that people are always looking for. But, and this is what I heard you say is that you can identify that. You could identify when people were becoming less engaged and stuff before. what would associations be doing next, and solving for that, figuring out those next pieces. That was like something that was a hidden missing link, right?
Yeah, and not even possible really until 2 years ago, right? And not really even possible till a year ago, right? This is all new technology is making it possible to do new things that are sort of cutting edge and exciting, right? For associations. Associations are the people, the groups of people to benefit the most from this technology.
Yeah. And I always go back to there's an association for everything, which means there's an association that represents every industry, which means they're incredibly powerful in their ability to influence entire industries that, are what run the world. And so this is something that the people who I think even who work within associations sometimes forget the roles that they play, very important roles in sort of spreading this knowledge and awareness to, the industries that they represent, sciences that they represent.
I think.
Dray, go ahead. Yeah.
Something I wanted to interject on as well, because it leads into what Dray's, hopefully the story here will sort of tell, but it's also just a comment, the gap in the association knowledge. The other thing that's been amazing to me, KiKi, has been what we have learned from the demos to associations like back our way. And one of them in the testing that we were doing with one of the organizations was that we hadn't, for this particular, we hadn't trained Betty on a very small sample just to show them what was possible. And of course, Betty was politely declining some of the questions that they were asking because she hadn't been trained on that. And in some cases, they were like, oh, well, actually, we don't even have any content about that knowledge need that was coming from the member. There's a gap. There's a gap in our content. There's a gap in our... Without Betty sort of surfacing that gap in the immediacy of the knowledge need that was created by the member, that organization would probably never have known that that is something that someone needed to do their job that day. And yet Betty, I mean, the generative AI tools, but Betty specifically can do this on an association's knowledge base and say, there's a knowledge gap. Hey, association content marketer, website manager, membership person, somebody needs something about this. Oh, and would you like me to help you create that new piece of knowledge? She can do that instantly, train herself on that knowledge, and then answer the question. And that is something that I know Dray, particularly in the background, is like constantly, now that we've seen that this is a thing, and it only came up probably late last year in one of the demos that Thomas and I were doing, is, oh, hang on a minute, we can do that. And now, again, it's become part of the foundation. It's so exciting to learn that from an association perspective and then go, oh, yeah, absolutely. Everybody's going to have this challenge. Let's build it into what we're doing. And that's what Dray's been working on.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, Dray. Okay. So you've been working on this. You've been seeing some of the light bulbs turn on for people who are suddenly, it's dawning on them. We haven't even been answering that question or creating content for that. We didn't even know that we needed to do that. What are some of the other insights that you've seen come about that in your interactions with associations working on this?
Yeah, and this is all part of what Rob teased as the association knowledge cycle. So the reason we're going to be talking about that more and more is because Betty very much plays a role in it. But that's existed before us. So before we were talking about it, the idea that there's some foundation of knowledge or information that associations have that then feeds into how what they're going to need to produce. So identifying those gaps or identifying where there's interest, and then that feeds into the process of actually producing content, which cycles back to the beginning, that foundation. What we've run into is a lot of people have been trying to do this. This is something that, like Thomas said, in the past year or two, it's revolutionized how you can do this or whether you can do this. Technically, it was possible before. So part of what we've run into is there are some groups out there that have full teams fully allocated to this process. You have things like Google Analytics to track all of your searches. You have massive projects to do taxonomy across all of your data and all of your information to keep it organized and searchable. You have teams that are reaching out to members and volunteers and all these other groups and people and time and money that associations, I haven't run into the association that just has that to spare. So some could do it because they were able to dedicate enough teams to it. Most could not. So what we've run into with Betty and with AI in general is that now that's possible. We don't have to have a team dedicated to this because we don't have to do outreach to the members. They come to us, ask a question, and if it's a question we think we should be able to answer, we can see, could we? Could we find information in our knowledge base? Was that something that we had the answer for? Or like Rob said, is that something that we need to fill that gap? That gap was extremely hard to find before, because if someone searched for something and didn't find it, you didn't actually gain information from that on your website. There wasn't much there. But with Betty, that's part of that cycle. So when we talk about Betty accelerating the association knowledge cycle, it very directly feeds into being able to say, here's what people are asking about. Here's where they're getting good answers. Here's where they're getting answers from content that maybe is a little outdated. So if things are 5 to 10 years old, they're still useful, but maybe we should update it. Here's where we're not getting answers at all, and maybe we should be looking into those topics because they're cutting edge. Allows the association to be a little more proactive. So that's where my focus has been, and Thomas especially too, with that cycle of, here was our core knowledge base. That's an awesome starting point, and technology has really changed how you can interact with it. But here's where it helps us identify that next step. And that's really where we've been focused, especially the past couple months, of making it actionable. So again, like we mentioned, just the idea of, we can tell you who is not likely to renew. Awesome. That's fun information, but it's not used much more than a report. Betty's making things like that actionable. So that's the big change for us over the past year with generative AI.
One thing that I think was revealed to us by implementing Betty and working with associations was, while associations do sit on this mountain of knowledge, most of the knowledge, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Most of the knowledge is not documented anywhere. It's in people's heads. Like, people are walking around and they know things, and they might add some nuance or some commentary on the existing documentation. But if they retire or move to another place, or for any other reason are no longer involved with the association, that knowledge disappears. It goes with them. Mm-hmm. Using these chat-enabled AI tools allows that knowledge to be codified and captured. So as people come, and if they provide feedback, and especially if you are intentional about that within your association, you can get the massive hive mind of all the knowledge that is carried around that is not yet documented, to be enabled for perpetuity, for time to come, right? And that's another really exciting thing that we're working on right now, is being able to have Betty actually get that information out of you, right? Like, have Betty kind of document that stuff for you, so that then all manner of blog posts, or webinars, or other kind of information is then captured and presented back to the members for everybody to benefit.
So, and you're actually doing this within Betty herself, yourself, itself. You're actually doing this at BettyBot, right? You're actually you're eating your own dog food, as they say. Yes. Yes.
Drinking our own champagne. Yes.
It's a much more appealing sort of idea. So, okay. So, and we had this queued up. We were testing this earlier, and like all technology, like, let's just all cross our fingers right now, or cross our legs under the table. So what am I looking at? Describe for us, and walk us through, audibly, so that people who are listening to this later have an idea what we're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we've got the BettyBot website open, and we are drinking our own champagne, and that we have Betty on our own website. The thing that's a little bit different between us having Betty and association is that we started with zero knowledge documented. We had zero, right? So what we started doing is, anytime we would get on a demo, or we would kind of talk to people, we would actually then run that through a plain version of Betty not trained on anything, and then use Betty to create the knowledge in real time that then goes back in the form of blog posts or supporting documentation that can be accessed on the website. So it's this way of responding to your needs, right, to the association's needs through their curiosity, to then on the fly create those documents that come across it. So for example, this concept of the association knowledge cycles really was revealed through us through these conversations. So what I just did is I basically typed into Betty, which is a chat interface on our website, tell me about the association knowledge cycle. And behind the scenes, what's going on? I think one of the key learnings that we did is, we don't have Betty just immediately answer a question. We have Betty intentionally form some empathy around the member, right, around the user. And Betty stops and thinks, hey, what are the knowledge needs that we're going to be servicing by asking this question. And then what we did is we used Betty to create a lot of knowledge on the fly. So if I say, what is the, tell me about the association knowledge cycle, she's going and finding all the documentation we've written about. Every time we've spoken about it and recorded it, either on a webinar, a presentation, or a demo. And we can actually pull that out, use it to respond back to the user or the member in a very long form. So this is, I won't read it all for people who can't see, but the general kind of idea, she's giving a good answer here. Pulling in images and video, like we can actually display that inline back to the member to show what's going on there, and then link back to where that came from. So everything is sourced, everything is provably linked back to some other document, all right there in one place, which is really exciting. And the only way we got to this is by listening to people trying to use Betty, right? By having conversations and getting out there, and then using Betty to create that next wave of documentation and knowledge that can be surfaced.
And just so that people understand, I always find this sort of process really interesting, because it's very similar to what you do for SEO, where you're trying to learn something from the way that people are entering and what they're searching for, what they're looking for. And then you're identifying ways to create content around that, so that it's the thing that pops up in the natural way that people ask for things. So so in this situation, as people are reading through it, they're going to develop their own questions, and you're going to see over time the themes of what most people ask next, what most people are interested in, how they're asking for it, right?
That's exactly right. And we'll be able to see sort of the threads, right? So as people ask questions, they might be accessing other certain parts of documents that you've provided, right? And they might have follow-up questions, right? We enable the follow-up. And then we also understand what's the thread there, right? Because that thread might be unique, and it might be really valuable for that one person in that one moment of time. And then you can learn from that and expand it and sort of take these kind of unique threads and show them back to people, not show them the threads, the conversations, but show them sort of the new insights that you're gleaning from people following their own curiosity. Really what Betty's doing at the end of the day is enabling people to follow their own curiosity, to satisfy their knowledge need, to take action with that knowledge need. And there's no way you could do that from the top down, right? You could not define a path for everybody in their specific moment of knowledge need, right? Because that's going to be, ephemeral. It's going to pass quickly, and they're going to come back with a different one. So it's really cool to be able to have a legacy of that, and then learn from it, and then expand on that so you can, meet the need next time it comes up.
Yeah.
And I think KiKi, at this, this is, again, one of the things that just kind of blew me away. As someone that spent, the best part of 10, 15 years trying to sell personalization, either like as an association executive, like we're trying to get to a point where we are sharing a personalized sequence of messaging, because we're trying to predict what we think our members are going to respond to the most, and you can A/B test it. And then I was selling personalization software, where it's like, okay, I can sell you the sequence of stuff and you can put it all together. This is what blew me away. It's like literally every conversation is personalized. This is a level of hyper personalization around the knowledge base for every user, and every time they come back. And because you can pull on a different thread of Betty's responses each time you interact in a way that you could never predict. Like no marketer in an association is ever going to be able to predict someone's going to ask that question and then ask that one and then ask that one, and this is the piece of content that we should serve them to do that. It's all. But Betty can follow that path and use the entire knowledge base of a profession, of an industry, of an association to help follow that path. It's like, just ask me the next question and I'll guide you down that path and prove to the user where we're getting that content. And I think that in this broader discussion around application of generative AI and ethical use of AI, these sorts of things, it's important to us to be able to share that our technology is, what's your comment? You call it provably. There's a really great piece that you say, but because she's able to reference exactly where she got that knowledge from, which is the association's knowledge only and their knowledge base, that's incredibly important to associations, to all of us, incredibly powerful in the way we share the tool.
Yeah, trust is Oh, go ahead, Thomas. Yeah.
Just provably true is the way I usually
Provably true. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, I really love, I don't know that I had realized this piece where it's like learn more, and then it has where you can learn more, where people can go.
Yeah.
This piece about where things are sourced from, this is huge. Whenever you hear these discussions, everyone about like, where are the references? Where are these things coming from? Are they being plagiarized? Are they copy? Like how can we trust what we're reading if we don't know where it's coming from? And there are all kinds of ways that you can like try to go about making sure that you're getting these references. But when it's built in so that it's the default, it's the easiest thing. We want to make things as simple as possible for the people who are going to our organizations and looking for answers. When it's right there and all they have to do is just click on it, find more information, go to that resource if they need to go to that resource. That is doing something that, and I said we talk about human behavior, we've been talking about it, but that's something that's cultivating trust, whether you realize it on the surface level or not. That's one of those little pieces that even in the interaction with your technology, you're cultivating trust with the people that you're interacting with. And so when your members are coming there, it's always, they're gauging trust on competence or on character. And so can they trust that you're going to say that you can do what you say you're going to do? Do they trust your character and intention? Do they trust your competence that you can actually do it? When you have something like that showing supportive evidence, you're showing that they can believe in things like your decision making, that they can trust in the information that you're providing them, because you're upfront already providing where you're providing that information from, right?
Yeah, and it's another reason why, again, associations are poised to benefit from the generative AI revolution. It's because the associations are the only groups out there that have done the hard work of being a nonprofit for 100+ years, that have really built that trust into their constituency, right? People look at you as the source of knowledge, right? Because you've been there
Right.
for over 100 years in some cases, right? And who is that person going to trust? Are they going to go to ChatGPT or Google, or are they going to come to you, right?
They're going to come to you. Right?
Exactly. And they should stay within your ecosystem, because you're the ones that have put in the work for 100+ years, right?
As long as it's simple enough. So that's part of what we deal with. There's a key problem that right now ChatGPT is a very easy thing to use, and as people get more used to generative AI, they might accept that lower quality option, that option that has no sources, just because they can just go ask the question. So that's part of
Dray,
what we're trying to do is,
you're so right. And we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen that people will sacrifice something that is even of higher quality. They will sacrifice even something where they can check the facts in order for it to be easy. They'll sacrifice it for ease, right? And so this actually is a great segue into the popular question that everybody's interested in. The big pushback on AI is like, how are you going to protect my data? How can I make sure that things are private? Associations are wildly concerned, as they should be, about this, because their data is their gold, right? And that is the thing that they've been pulling together. So when all of us on the consulting side say, always work with your vendors to find out how they're using their data, da 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 da. So I have to go ahead and softball question. This is the question everybody asks. Throw it over to you, because how do you work with associations like that? How do you make sure that they feel safe when they're working with you?
So we put in a lot of time to make sure we've read terms of use very thoroughly when we're dealing with these AI models. So we're not creating our own language models. We are using third parties. We make sure that whatever ones we're using, whenever you're passing data through them, they have very clear terms of service that say they cannot use that information for training additional models. They can't share it. If they retain anything at all, it's only for the purposes of higher quality interaction with you specifically. So we're very careful about what we use. We're very careful about what we store. So we try to make sure we're pulling in these knowledge bases that might be course content recordings, transcripts. We're not pulling in individual information. So we're not pulling in information about member 123. I don't have any information about Thomas Altman in the Betty trained on Betty. And that's intentional. There are some requests that are like, hey, could Betty interact with our AMS? and pull in a member profile and do X, Y, and Z for them? And the answer is sort of. We could make her do that, but that's something we want to be slow to roll out. So we're being
Right.
cautious on those fronts when we start getting into personal information and how we're going to interact with it.
Yeah. I think that's one of those things where it's like you can get really excited. I get really excited about that because as somebody who wants to think about, oh, well, I mean, if we can customize and create and personalize and like we can find out you're this type of person, you're like, you fall into this segment and all of the details I have about you, why wouldn't I use that, right? And then it is this very careful, you have to be tread very carefully along those lines to make sure that, you know, you're keeping their privacy in consideration, that you're not doing anything that if they understood it, that they would have a problem with. So there are a lot of things. I actually don't envy all of the concerns that you have to go through to like figure out like the best ways to use what is really like a powerful, the incredibly powerful tools and technology that we have available to us. So, what are some of the biggest insights you've seen along the way? I mean, obviously, you've shared some of the ones that you've seen, even in demos, where it's like, oh wow, the light bulb's coming on, and they're realizing that this is content they've never created before. They didn't even realize that they needed to. As you've been developing some of these things, having these conversations, are there other things that you've come across where you're like, huh, I never would have guessed, or have you seen some inventive new ways that some associations are figuring out how to use Betty?
I think one of my favorite moments is always when you're on the phone talking to some of the experts who know the content inside and out as well as a person can know it. They ask a question and they have fully in their mind what content's going to be used to answer it. Betty finds that, and then she finds 3 other documents that maybe they didn't remember. So it was created by someone at some point. It's something that the association has in their knowledge base, but they didn't remember it. And if they didn't remember it, no one else remembered it was out there. No one's finding it, no one's using it, but it added additional context to those answers. I kind of love that moment of them being like, not only was that pulling the information that I knew and could have referenced if a member asked me the question, but it pulled in other information that I had forgotten about or never knew about. And suddenly we actually got a higher quality answer that no one could have provided. None of our experts, engineers, scientists, whoever they might be able to reference in the space could have given an answer that was that complete.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, there was a moment in a demo at one point with their source documentation is huge standards, really technical specifications documentation. And the president and CEO was one of the challenges that they were facing is that they're 3 subject matter experts who their staff rely on weekly, like multiple times a week. Gentlemen who have been in and around these standards documents for decades, and they're in their 80s. And the staff are still relying on their expertise, their institutional knowledge, like Thomas was talking about before, that's in their heads to help the staff craft the appropriate responses, because you can't afford to get this stuff wrong. And these 3 guys are the trusted sources. They've been trusted for 50 years and they're still trusted today. Great. And then the president on the call was like, well, we should just get them to write their answers or record their answers for us, and we'll train Betty on that. And we were like, actually, yeah, absolutely. Like, if you have all of their emails, actually, we could start with that. But this idea formed that, like, if you have tenured members that it's about time you just let them retire from the association, then you can record their institutional knowledge really quickly. Like, you could have them just literally record their voices and take the transcript and then train a version of Betty on that knowledge. And that knowledge will then live for every member that comes after them and will be available to their staff, as well as the technical documentation, but the interpretations, the communications that go along with that. And we were like, and particularly me, who's, I've worked on history projects and stuff before in my life. I'm like, recorded history is amazing, but now to be able to have a conversation with someone's recorded history and learn from that, like, I was shut the front door. Let's go.
I know. I mean, I'm thinking about just even my little Winona historic. I live in Winona, New Jersey, everyone. It was just like the smallest little town, but outside of Philadelphia. But yeah, I'm thinking about the Winona Historical Society and like how amazing it would be to like interact and have some of these things captured, and where you're able to go in and get information. There's no way you would, I mean, you'd have to know where to go, what to listen to, where to, and when you have it captured like that, there are so many different ways that it can be accessed and not necessarily forgotten, right? That's the other piece, is what you're talking about, are these resources that are being pulled from these spaces that are out there, that they're not the ones. It doesn't matter if somebody was horrible about the way they designed your website, at some point, if it's at all accessible, this data, to be able to get to this data. These resources that are buried don't need to stay buried.
Yep. Another way to think about specifically that, like that idea of the historical society, right? But think in terms for it, bring that up to sort of the association level and your events, right? Mm-hmm. So not only could you have a conversation with a session, you could have a conversation with the event. Meaning, if you record all the sessions, they're spread across, multiple days. Some of them are competing together, and you just want to know about a topic. You can grab the pieces of each session that was relevant to that topic, and you're basically talking to the event as a whole, right? And it's
oh
really,
my gosh.
it's really
okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wait a second. Just full. I'm appreciating this.
Yeah.
This is great. Anybody wants to look up something called the genius loci. This is an ancient Greek concept of places having spirits, but in general, the idea is that you would have a spirit of the conference, but it would actually be this character that's based on the information and experiences there inside. I love it.
Yeah, the genius loci. I love that. That's gonna be a blog post that Betty writes.
Yep, yeah. That's it.
For the longest time, you know super well with your experience with events, like associations are constantly like, hey, part of the value is you can get access to the recordings afterwards, which is great. But when you think of a question that you wished you had have asked on the session, or actually one of the great ideas that Thomas and Dray had was like, if you miss a session at annual meeting because it's at a time slot and you miss that session, imagine being able to go to Betty and say, hey, can you give me a précis of what happened in that session? Because I was in this other session and I want to know what the insights were from the session that I missed. I don't want to listen to the whole recording again because I've probably got 13 of them I want to get through. I can just ask Betty, hey, tell me what was in KiKi's session over there because I accidentally missed it. And I can get that knowledge. So I can ask the event to help me understand the things that I missed, synthesize across those sessions as well, so that if I have a theme that I go into, like ethics, for instance, anytime someone mentioned about ethics, it'll bring that sort of together and I can get the broad concepts across everything that occurred. That's an enormous amount of value for an event registrant that currently sits locked inside all the session recordings. It's there, but we've now created access to it. And because of those intricate knowledge needs, the questions that I might ask, again, for the association, it'll surface perhaps a gap or an opportunity where there's this connection between ethics and AI. Who would have thought? Yeah. And let's bring that together and have a very specific follow-up webinar, knowing you've got a captive audience of that, because here's all the questions that were asked and answered around that during the course of the event. This happened to us last week on ASAE's AI Summit. So during the course of the summit, I was kind of watching the threads and looking at Dray was demonstrating Betty across things. And at the same time, Betty on Betty's website was getting hammered with questions, some of which she wasn't necessarily answering as directly as the users would have liked. The chat logs were hilarious, by the way. But it surfaced for us after day one a knowledge need that people had about Betty that we hadn't answered yet and she wasn't trained on.
Ooh, that's
So what did
interesting. Yeah.
Thomas do? Thomas is like, hey, we need to produce something. So we produced something overnight, trained her, and we asked the same questions. The same questions were getting asked on day 2, and she was giving the complete answer.
Beautiful.
But we wouldn't have known that that's what people wanted to know had it not been for the interactions on day 1, and people were able to follow that up and get answers to their needs. And so it's been interesting, the conversations that we've had with some of those execs on the AI Summit already this
Mhm.
week, because the maturity, the level of insight that they already have coming into our conversation is making my role just that much. It's much more fun, but it's a little
Yeah.
bit easier because they're
Yeah.
coming with an informed, because they've already used Betty, so they know how to use generative AI. They've already asked most of the questions that they would typically ask on, a software sales call. They've done all of that. It's like, okay, let's get to the meat and potatoes here. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, and I love that everyone's beginning to understand this idea of your training, you have to go and see, sometimes where there are those gaps and you're filling those in, which is a space where I feel like even if you could identify those before, it wasn't something that was as immediately apparent or as immediately fixable as it is now. And now it's not only more apparent, more like quickly, but then it's also easier to fix some of that and to create the content that you need to in order to like fill that gap. I want to just point out that LinkedIn user here who's watching live. Those of you who are listening to this later, you can't see the screen or anything, but there's a really great comment that came up from LinkedIn user who says, Betty isn't making up the answer. She's helping synthesize and source it from your library, in quotes, and producing it in something very consumable. But she will answer based on your information. So your information needs to be vetted and properly sourced. And that's such a key piece of all of this, is that when we're talking about the information that that Betty's provided, the information that's being pulled in to provide context and to pull in some of these answers, you do need to be very aware, hyper aware of what that information is, where she's pulling her information from, and to make sure that it's properly sourced. It's such a good point, and I think that begs for me to just make one little tiny reference that I'm sure that all of my tech friends out there will appreciate about data governance, having clean data, having good data hygiene. Have I talked about all of the fun stuff yet? Like all of the, yes, brush your teeth, please. And also go and, you need to take care of your muscles. This is all very important stuff. But
that's where Thomas's point earlier around this is now the time for associations, because the veracity of Betty's answers is based on the fact that the knowledge source for her is this content that has been produced. It could be white papers, it could be policy documents, it's advocacy work. It's all of that goes through a process that is tried and tested, and not only does the association, the profession, the industry trust that process to arrive at a document that speaks exactly how the association wants that topic to be spoken about. But the public trust this. Governments trust many of these associations. The veracity of that answer is now available through BettyBot because those sources, and it's provably true. Again, it's part of what. But that is so incredibly important, as our LinkedIn user has said. It's vetting and properly sourcing that has been happening within associations in a very rigorous way for over 100 years. Now we're able to unlock that in a way that's usable to anyone that the association wants to have that usable. It's so exciting.
Yeah, and I think we can kind of close the loop on what KiKi, you were just saying, which is we are building Betty in such a way that she can receive feedback through natural language. So I'm starting to think of her, and you're not buying Betty, you're not onboarding Betty, you're hiring Betty. Betty is going to be a part of your team, and the first task you give her is go read and perfectly memorize all these knowledge base assets, right? And then you can quiz her. You have your one-on-ones with her. You say, hey, Betty, let's talk about this. And does she get it 100% right? Hopefully so. Every once in a while, she might miss a piece of nuance. If she misses nuance, probably it was never documented in the first place. And through natural language, you can say, oh, hey, Betty, that was a good answer, but really, I think you need to incorporate this next time someone answers it. And then not only is that preserved, you're giving her coaching and feedback in your own natural language in real time. That is preserved immediately so that it then is available to everyone going forward, right? So there's this sort of aspect of making sure that the feedback and the onboarding is also a natural language task. It's something that you would do as if you had hired a junior, developer or whoever it might be, right? A junior person to come on and you would coach them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, because that is that feedback and what you're doing and interacting so that it becomes, I feel like organic is another word that's overused, but that it becomes sort of a natural flow. You want to have it so that it's naturally leading to better and more accurate responses, right? And that the outcomes and experiences are just naturally getting better and better. So that's the goal. Dre, do I crack you up? Like I
That's our talking point. Like, that is the cycle that we're talking about. Like, it flows naturally from step to step. You're not investing massive amounts of time and energy and technology and money and all that fun stuff that we don't have enough of. It just happens. People interacting and providing feedback and conversationally doing this just create higher quality and new content. So it's kind of automatic going forward.
Yeah, I love it. So, I mean, I feel like this has not been just the typical discussion. I feel like we avoided talking about just AI, straight up AI, the technology by itself for most of it. How do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, and we're saying like 1 being no, we were basically all about the technology, to 10 being like we did something that was a little bit different than what every other discussion about BettyBot is. How did we do? I'm looking for something high up here, right?
Yeah, we did pretty well. But what I've loved about this, especially this past year, most of our discussions about AI get philosophical. The technology is there. People want to know more about it, but figuring out how you integrate AI into your world, into the world in general, is a bigger topic than just what the technology is capable of. So I love when we intentionally go down that path. Most conversations drift that direction anyway. I'd still put you probably in the 7 or 8 range. So we did well.
7 or 8, I'll take it. So I wanted to ask each of you, and I didn't warn you this ahead of time, but I wanted to ask each of you before I let you go, because I think that you're each and all very intelligent and creative and interesting individuals. I would love to know, one, where you get a lot of your technology insight, whether you go to like AI podcasts or technology podcasts that keep you informed. And I'm saying podcasts, but I mean like really also like, it could be magazines, it could be like newsletters, that type of thing. And also about for association industry news. Where do you go? So I'm giving each of you a chance to pitch your faves. So I'm going to pick on Thomas first, because I do think I actually asked him something kind of like this once a long time ago. So
yeah, so I'll go through my list. So as far as AI-based podcasts, if I was going to recommend one, it would be one called AI Explained. It's on YouTube. He does a great job of breaking down current events and AI in a really understandable manner, right? He demystifies it. As far as like how stuff I use, I go to a lot of the academic articles actually on Archive, a lot of which are actually written in plain English. So I would recommend anyone with sort of any inkling of just wanting to know what is cutting edge, arxiv.org, archive.org. You'll find a lot of stuff in there that is consumable from even someone without the background training and a lot of the stuff too. On the association side, your podcast is amazing and I love it and I watch it all the time. And if people are already here, let's keep doing it. Right? Sidecar and ASAE are the other ones that I go to for my most up-to-date stuff there.
It sounds good. All right. I'm going to go to you, Dre, and then Rob.
Perfect. So I end up using a lot of the same sources as Thomas, but one thing I'll add as a general source for us, kind of lucky to be part of the Blue Cypress family of companies, very association focused. And there's just a lot of people dealing with a lot of different problems for associations and talking about it. I actually just got back from 5 days where we hold up 9 people on the technical side from this family of companies in a house and spent probably 16 hours a day just experimenting with AI.
Wow.
I have not recovered yet, so hopefully I'm actually speaking in ways that make sense, but I've got to catch up on sleep still. But stuff like that kind of keeps us up to date and make sure that we're trying new things, not just getting kind of stuck in the rut of delivering a product, keeping the focus a little broader.
Okay, awesome. Rob, you're up.
I got Thomas and Dray.
I
I
mean, you
think
could, yeah, they keep
our,
you up to date.
our daily huddles as a team, like every day, it's just something just opens my eyes, blows my mind. But I go to them first a lot of because what I'm practicing is being a lot more curious about parts of it. Parts of the technology side of things that I wouldn't typically spend time getting involved in. And I can pressure test some of the ideas and the thoughts that I have with Thomas and Dray, and they're like, you're a lunatic, or no, you're asking the right kind of questions. So I'm practicing being curious about that. I'm also I used to spend like a half hour first thing in the morning, half hour later in the afternoon, which is where I process all my email. That was but now email is so inconsequential to me. The stuff that's important to me is the demo bookings that come in, and I can take care of them really super quickly. So what I've done actually is I've set aside that time as AI practice time. So for me, it's about choose a tool, do some practice, share my results with the team, and just to be mindfully thinking about practicing. Now what I'm also able to do is start listening a little bit. So, of course, association chat and our community, the new era of community, association chat. Like, so I get a lot more of my influence from the engagement, the backwards and forwards with coworkers, rather than kind of just a listening thing. It's a little bit harder for me to learn from. Association Tech Insider is great. Johanna, also Pinata, shout out to you. I love your podcast. So I'm getting involved because what I really like to listen to is I like to listen to the language of the association executive as they're asking questions and being curious about that, because those are the things that I need to be responsive to and make sure that we are talking about when we're presenting a solution like ours. So I really like all of that. And the more I practice it, the more I'm listening to that language in the podcasts and the reading. Sidecar Sync is another one that I will listen to. The community on Sidecar, the association chat community particularly, the work that we do in Collaborate on ASA, all of that together. So I get the listening and the practicing at the same time, and that for me creates a nice little full circle of learning.
I love it. Oh, thank you so much for joining me. I know, Rob, I was in an airport sending a message off to you. I think you were either in an airport or something similar. And we were trying to figure out times when we could get the team together. And here you are. We made it happen. I think we had a really great conversation. And I learned something. And I hope that everyone else did too. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Appreciate you having
me. This was great. Thanks.
All right. Okay. I will talk to you all soon. Oh my gosh. It's that time again. I can't believe we're at the end of the show. But I have to say, this conversation was not like every other conversation that's out there about AI, at least not for me, because it wasn't just about AI, right? It was about something else. It was about a company that's choosing to interact and learn from its own product, that's interacting with its clients in new and thoughtful ways. And it's also about, and we didn't get into this as much as we could have, so maybe this is a future episode, but about this conscious development of culture, developing culture on purpose. These are the things that I was hearing in addition to some of the cool stuff that is happening with the product itself. So I had a good time, and I see you over there, Tanya. Yes, thank you. I'm so glad you were on, Joanna and Joanna. JP, let's just call it JP. Everyone who is able to watch, you anonymous LinkedIn users too, I am so happy that you were able to comment. For those of you who are listening to it later, as it's not live, let me know in the comments what you thought about it. If you have questions for any of these guys later. And with that, I ask you to keep asking questions every day, because as Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Stay curious, everyone.